Hi, everybody. Hi. Hello, Scotland. Wow. Woo! Absolute pleasure to be here. I'm from very, very far south in the UK. I'm from Bath. And I really love the fact that Bath is a really pretty city. And I'm like, yeah, Bath's like the prettiest city. And I was walking around here yesterday and I was like, damn it, I think Edinburgh is the prettiest city. God damn it. But yes, absolute pleasure to be here. It's not the down button. That's the down button. Warnings for the talk. There are animated GIFs in this talk, mostly My Little Ponies. There is music in this talk. And there are visuals in this talk. They are not flashing visuals, but if you do struggle with anything sort of flashing, fair warning, they come in at the end. So just be aware, I will not be offended if you can't look at the projector or you want to leave the room or anything like that. Please do. I will not be offended, like I said. My name's Ruth, and I'm here to talk to you about MIDI, which is a very odd topic. I get that, right? By the way, at Rumira on all the internets if you need to find me. So that's Twitter, CodePen, GitHub. That's how you can find me. And that's all you really need to know about me for the talk. The reason that I want to talk about MIDI at a web conference is so that I can address a common misconception about it. And it's something like this. There should be audio for this. No? The guy with the audio is like, no, we've got no audio. And it's like, great. Is the whole talk not going to have any audio? Don't. Maybe it's coming out of the projector. Is that a thing? Okay, we'll have to do the talk without audio. We just did a sound check and it was awesome. Okay, so I'll do the audio. Bleep, 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 right? So, common... Thank you. Okay, we've got audio there.
Is it working?
It was a minute ago, it's not now. I think it's probably because we plugged the projector in, it's trying to come out the projector. It's fine. So anyway, the common misconception there is that the bleeping sounds that I just did is MIDI. That's not MIDI. That's digital audio. And there's a really good reason for this. I mean, MIDI itself stands for Musical Instrument Digital Interface, right? So we sort of get hung up on this sort of musical instrument bit, which is fair enough. I mean, that's what it stands for. That's why the data protocol came around in the first place. But the really, really interesting bit about MIDI, and the bit that I'm going to talk to you about today, is this digital interface. MIDI itself is a data protocol, and it is a digital interface. And it is just the data that is passed around between musical instruments. It's not the actual audio itself. That is digital audio, right? MIDI came around the first spec came around in 1983, and it came around because a bunch of industry experts all get together. These were music manufacturers, people like musicians, everything like that came together, and there was a rise in popularity of digital instruments in the 70s, and they didn't have a way to talk to each other. So they were bringing all these sort of big synthesizers and digital keyboards and things into recording studios, and they couldn't really talk to each other. And all of them were sort of giving out different digital signals. And so all these industry experts got together and they thought to themselves, wouldn't it be nice if we had a specification that was common between all these instruments so they could talk to each other? And this is how MIDI came about. So they brought out the original spec. No, it isn't. It's the projector. But thank you. That's the mute. Yeah, it's not doing it. Huh? Yeah, it's staying on mute. They're talking about audio, so. General MIDI 1 was the first specification, and this is the common specification, and it was made up of 3 parts. There's lots and lots of MIDI specifications, and I'm going to talk to you about some of them today. I'm not going to talk to you about all of them. If you want to look at all of them, they're on MIDI.org. General MIDI was formed of 3 parts. The first one is the actual digital protocol itself, which I'll go into in a minute because we have a Web MIDI API, which is awesome. There was a MIDI file format, which is why we sort of associate it with that bleepy sort of computer sounds that you hear. It's because things are saved in this file format, and that was the digital audio that we had back in the 80s. And then the third part was this connector specification, which back in the 80s was this big fat sort of DIN connector. I think some of you might have seen it. And you need a really expensive sound card to sort of run this DIN connector. Nowadays, that's been superseded by USB, so it's got more affordable, which is really, really great for us. So general MIDI. the best way from, like, the core of this is messages, like I've been saying. And it's this data protocol, which is basically just numbers. The best way for me to tell you about this is for me to show you, because it is quite boring. And I could talk to you all day about the different kinds of messages you get with that specification, but it is just better for me to illustrate it to you. So you will need, yeah, you're getting involved with this. You will need a device. I like the way that people are actually reaching for devices. A modern browser. It's a JavaScript conference. I'm pretty sure you've got a modern browser to hand. And you need to go to that URL. I'm sorry that's not a better URL, but I was struggling with the internet this morning. So I'm just going to give you a minute. I'm going to drink my tea. And you can go to that URL. And you can give me a thumbs up when you get there. Oh, it's nice tea. So I think it's, I know, I think my output is, there we go, thank you. I got a thumbs up over here. Awesome, I got some thumbs up, great. So you should see something a little bit like this, right? And if you press the buttons on the keyboard, you should see some data being passed at the top, right? See a little arrays of numbers there? This is basically MIDI. So this is exactly what you get if you plug in a digital keyboard via USB into your computer and ran the Web MIDI API. This array of numbers, right? There's two sets going on there, so you've got like a note on and a note off. I'll take you through what they mean in a minute, but just so you know, this is the Web MIDI API. This is all it is. It's really, really simple, actually. All you do is you request MIDI access on the navigator object, and all I'm doing is just running through any data that I'm receiving on that. And that's all it is. Brilliant, right? So you can plug in any MIDI hardware, and you just get some numbers. And you can do whatever you want with that. There is a sysx flag. So sysx is false in this code example, and all that is, if you set that to true, is that means you can pass data back to the device. So you might have seen LAUNCHPADs with the array of buttons with the lights. That means you can set the lights to do whatever you want, right? And we'll go into that in a bit more detail later. But all we're doing is just looping over any data that we get and just piping it out. What do these numbers mean? It's pretty straightforward. The first one is note on. The second one, because we're dealing with music most of the time, is the note that's being played. And the last one is velocity. So the harder you press, the higher the number that's going to be. Sometimes you don't get 3 values, sometimes you just get 2 because there's no velocity. But for a keyboard, you get 3. The second value you get, the note off, is pretty much exactly the same. It's just the first value's changed because we're doing a note off rather than a note on. What about sound? So it is intrinsically linked to music. So what we would do with the Web MIDI API is we'd probably link it to the Web Audio API, right? It's a classic companion to the Web MIDI API, and a lot of the examples that you'll find on the internet are actually matched with Web Audio. You don't have to do this, by the way, but for our examples, we're going to do that. So you take the data, and you'd alter any sounds that you're creating with the Web Audio API with that data. Now, there's kind of 4 main ways to create sounds with the Web Audio API. You can create an oscillator, so that's just creating a sound wave, and then you can alter that with any data you get with MIDI. You can grab audio from the audio element or the web or the video element in the DOM. You can stream it. So this is fun. You can stream it from your microphone, from any other stream that you have data from, or you can request it from a buffer. So you can pass sounds into a buffer, and then you can just request it with the data from MIDI. Do we still have our keyboards? Cool, right? I got some nods, because you're going to need those. So you should be able to play some sounds on your keyboards now. No? I'm wondering if the WebSockets is packed in. I got one note over there. I got a better MIDI controller. It's pretty loud. Okay, so that's an example of using an oscillator with Web MIDI, right? So this is a MIDI controller that I have, And all I'm doing is just taking the data and creating an oscillator with the Web Audio API. This isn't my code. This is a really lovely bit of code by my friend Dave McIntosh. And you can basically find it on CodePen. And you can plug in most MIDI controllers, and it will create an oscillator when you press buttons on your MIDI controller. Timing is important. Timing is important with MIDI, not only because you're dealing with music, so you're sort of playing music, so you've got to keep in time, but also because you're recording stuff. And recording stuff has to mean that there's no latency. This is really, really hard on the web, and I'm hoping that we still have our keyboards open, because even though the last demo didn't work, I'm really hoping this does work. Do we have our keyboards open? Not at me. Okay, good. Okay, cool. Right. So, yeah, I just made all your phones ring. Well, I was hoping I did. So not only can you pass me MIDI data from your phones, I can pass it back. So the whole idea there was what I was trying to illustrate was there's latency on the web. Not all your phones rang at the same time. We had a couple of rings going on in the audience. This is really, really tricky on the web to try and time everything the same. There's no timing in the Web MIDI API. This is a different API, though. There's a draft sitting in W3C right now. If you don't take anything else away from this talk, go and read this draft. This isn't just about MIDI. This is a timing model object API. So this is, see, we've got a ring. See, like I said, latency, it's crazy, right? This, hopefully, will resolve all those problems. This is about having a timing object, which means you can start it in your app, and you can basically make sure all the time is the same throughout your app. And, hey, I'm not doing this. This is illustrating my point very well. This isn't just about MIDI, this is about any kind of media. We're talking audio, video, animation, anything like that. Any kind of real-time stuff you want to do with WebSockets, like I'm trying to do now, it's a really, really good read. A couple of quotes from it is to provide a unifying API for timed operation and temporal control, or to encapsulate complexity of distributed time synchronization. Charlotte just spoke about language. Yeah. I think we could probably revise that last sentence, but yeah. It's a really cool read. Go and read it. It made my mind go, yes, this is exactly what we need. There's a machine control spec sitting in the MIDI specs, right? So this is all about recording. So because we take sort of instruments into recording studios, they also came out with a recording spec so that when MIDI data is being passed back and forth, we can actually time it correctly. Funnily enough, we also have a MEDIARECORDER API now. That came out in Chrome 49 and Firefox 25, which is great. I don't have a demo for this, but Soledad, who works for Mozilla, she's got some really great demos for this, and she's done a really, really great talk. You should check it out. It's probably on the internet. She wrote a really, really good article on Firefox on the Mozilla blog, so go and read it. It's all about streams. So you take any kind of recording streams, like your camera or your microphone, and you can record it, and then you can do whatever you want with that data. So you can just play it back, you can run it onto the canvas, you can put filters on it, all the rest of it. It's a really fun API. Timeout, I know, specs, right? Specs are quite boring. MIDI instruments. So this might clarify a few things for you. I'm talking about MIDI a lot, but there's a huge range of MIDI-enabled devices out there. We've already seen keyboards, because you've all had one. This is one of the most common ones. I'm sure that you've all seen them in real life and probably all played one. This is just digital keyboard. And it's cheaper to buy one that's MIDI-enabled than it is to find one without MIDI-enabled now, because they're just little boxes that just sit within the device and just pipe out data. The one in the top middle there, that's a synthesizer. Synthesizers are really their own beasts. They have like onboard audio, and you can mix that audio, you can put filters on it, you can record onto the device, like they're a whole sort of instrument unto themselves. They're kind of crazy and kind of expensive. The one on the far right there, that's a electronic drum kit. So that plays drums, but it also pipes out MIDI data as well. So you can just sort of play drums and have MIDI data coming out of it, which is kind of cool. The ones along the bottom are probably more relevant to what we want to do as developers. These are MIDI controllers. So they don't have any onboard audio, but they're MIDI-enabled devices, right? So the one on the left, that's a LAUNCHPAD. I'm pretty sure most of you would have come across them or seen them. It's just basically an array of buttons. I mean, you can do really cool things with it, and it has different profiles, but that's all we're dealing with as a developer. And pretty affordable. Version 1s are around 70 quid. They have got a Mark II now, which is a little bit more expensive. But, yeah. They're really good fun. The ones in the middle are even more affordable. So the top one is the one that I showed the video for earlier. That's an Aké LPD8. This is the one that I have. It's basically just got 8 pads and 8 dials. and they just give you MIDI data in a browser. You just plug it in via USB, and you've just got some numbers. The one at the bottom, that's a Korg NanoPad, so it's pretty much the same, but you just don't have any dials, and you have this nice little touchpad on the left. The one on the right, that's an Icon iDJ, and the reason I have it there is because it's kind of my pet fave, and it gives you a good example of the kind of range of different things you can get. This is like a DJ sort of thing where you should pipe 2 tracks to either side and you can mix them. But again, you just sort of turn the dials and you press the buttons, and you're just getting data as far as the Web MIDI API is concerned. So really, when we're talking like MIDI, we're talking about affordable hardware, so we're making the browser hardware ready, and it's a really easy way of doing it. We can make it hardware ready in other ways, but it usually involves soldering or sort of creating pies and Sprinos and all that kind of onboarding stuff. And with MIDI, you can just plug in and go, which I think is great. Great. More specs. So there's a MIDI show control spec. So this is kind of cool. So what they found was, because they were using MIDI on stage a lot for music, the lighting people and the pyrotechnics people were like, we've got a data protocol here, can we use it for that? And they're like, yeah, we can use it for that. So they started using it. It's kind of been superseded by other data protocols now, but they're very closely related to MIDI. And actually, the fountains outside the big hotels in Las Vegas still use MIDI to be controlled, because they have big fountain displays, which is just insane. There is also a MIDI visual control spec. This is one of my favorite specs. So when you go to sort of a club or a gig now, it's not just a musical presentation you see like a visual presentation as well. So they have a visual control spec, and this is all about syncing the music with the visuals. And you can do that with the MIDI data, because MIDI data is coming out of the instruments, you may as well sync the visuals to it as well. So I kind of thought we could do that. I don't know whether you still got your keyboards, and I don't know if this is going to work, because the last time it didn't work. But we should try it anyway. I'm kind of thinking everybody's getting their keyboards out. That's cool. Oh, you want the URL again? Okay, hang on. There, yeah. There we go. I'm going to make all your phones ring again. One day I'll do this with beacons, and it'll be a lot easier. I can still see people typing it in, that's why I'm waiting, sorry. Okay, we good? Hey. They're all gonna ring. There you go. Okay, so I'm gonna change your keyboard into a MIDI controller now, because I thought we could crowdsource a massive MIDI controller. Okay, so I'm hoping this will work. Hopefully everybody's kind of got a mini LAUNCHPAD now. So you should see 4 buttons. Maybe, maybe not. Yes, we've got 1 over here, 1 will do. So the other thing about MIDI data, we've got 2, great. The other thing about MIDI data is it's really interesting that you have this array of 3 numbers, and you think, what can we do with an array of 3 numbers? Funnily enough, when it comes to visuals, that looks a little bit like a color. So what I did was I piped you all a different color. So I've given you all a different bit of MIDI data. So when you're pressing your buttons at the bottom, you should be able to change like the colors at the top. Yeah, some of you have got this. This is great. So this is everybody who's connected. Some of you can control it, some of you can't. And when you're pressing the buttons at the bottom, you should be able to change the colors at the top. Some of you can, some of you can't. And then what we can do is we can actually analyze audio with the Web Audio API, so we can actually make a little visual presentation. I'm not going to play it too loudly because I don't want to offend anybody. It doesn't really matter to me. Some people have got it. MIDI, right? It's great. Like, so how do we do that? So yeah, there's a lot of things we can do with MIDI. It's not just about this audio bleeping thing that we didn't hear, but you get the idea. We had a little bit of web audio there because you can analyze audio with the Web Audio API, as I'm sure you're all aware. There was a little bit of Web Animation API in there as well. So Web Animation API, this is a really, really simple example. It looks a lot like CSS animations, as I'm sure you've all seen. That's because it's basically the same technology. The thing about putting it into JavaScript is you have a lot more control. Animation is event-driven. JavaScript is event-driven. So to have the Web Animation API gives us a lot more power over these animations. I'm really excited by this. Basically, you just do whatever element, whatever DOM element, .animate. And then you can just change whatever styles and whatever you want. It's a great API. I suggest you all look into it if you haven't already. MIDI transport specifications. So I already sort of touched on this at the start. We've got like a 5-pin DIN cable for USB. The 5-pin DIN cable, which is the original, this has now been sort of superseded by USB. There is a web USB specification sitting in draft with the W3C. It's going to be really, really interesting when this comes about because most MIDI controllers at the moment are using USB. So we're going to see how, I'm really interested to see how those match up. But the other really, really interesting specification that's coming out at the moment with MIDI is a Bluetooth MIDI spec. So they're bringing out a lot of instruments at the moment that are Bluetooth enabled rather than using USB. So they brought out a Bluetooth spec which is encoding and decoding MIDI data over Bluetooth low energy. So this is really fun. And there's some really, really cool instruments that are actually coming about. There's little ones that you just move the accelerometer and it just pipes MIDI data over Bluetooth. I need to get me one of these so I can play with it. There's a Web Bluetooth API. It's under a flag in Chrome at the moment. You just do navigator.bluetooth request device. There's a lot to be said about it. Dan's talking about it. So that's really cool. I don't have to say any more. What possible uses for MIDI? Like I'm talking about it a lot, and we've got this hardware, and we've got like hardware-enabled like browser stuff and web stuff and all this code, and you're thinking, well, this is great and it's fun, but what could we actually use it for? Madion's a venture machine. This is built by We Make Awesome. They built it like over a year ago, and it's basically just a website which has a sort of sequencer on. And if you have a LAUNCHPAD, you can plug it in. If you don't, it still works. They've had 30,000 plugs in of LAUNCHPADs. So this isn't like something that just bypasses that a few people do. This is a real thing that actually people are really into, which is kind of cool. Navigating web pages. And when it comes to accessibility, we kind of use the keyboard a lot, but we've never questioned it. Like it's a good control of the keyboard, but it is kind of small. And it's just buttons. I mean, MIDI controllers, they have dials, they have bigger buttons, they have like sliders. That might be a better way to navigate a web page. Dinosaurs. So on the Isle of Wight, there's Black Gang Sheen. I don't know whether you know about this theme park. They have these massive dinosaurs, and one of my friends, he's in charge of like hacking these dinosaurs. So inside of these big dinosaurs, they have metal skeletons, which are movable, and they're powered by Raspberry Pis. And they've basically loaded Node onto these Raspberry Pis, right? So you can hack the dinosaurs. So he was coming up with ways of making the dinosaurs more interactive. So putting things like a motion sensor on the T-Rex, so that when the kids walk past, the T-Rex can kind of look around and glare at them. But we were thinking, maybe we could have MIDI controllers for the little dinosaurs. So the little kids and the big kids like me could go in and just sort of move those dinosaurs themselves. I thought that would be a really great idea. Controlling your home. So this is a desktop drum machine. And basically you just play the drums on your desk. Imagine sort of everything in the home is connected now, and everything's sort of web connected as well, so it's web technologies. Imagine just sticking one of these on your wall and just turning on and off your lights with it, or doing disco lights with it, which is what I would do. You can also sort of create a pack, like take your laptop, take a MIDI controller, create some VJ software, which is a little bit like you just saw, sort of strap it to yourself and then just walk around the street sort of projecting stuff, which is exactly what I did at Christmas. And then write about it. There's an article all about this, and we'll be doing some more of this later. So there's amazing uses for it. I was totally talking about MIDI a lot, but I was also talking about specifications a lot, and there's a lot of specifications sitting in the MIDI constabulary, right? There's a lot of specifications sitting in W3C. If you get a really enthusiastic industry and you get a lot of people coming together and doing things like open source and things like that, you get some really, really good communal, like substantial specs, basically. Some really fun things to play with that are long-lasting. Everybody thought that MIDI was over. It's not over. Thank you very much for letting me talk to you about MIDI.